and welcome to Talk Time. My guest today is celebrated writer Mr. Arup Kumar Dutta, Padma Shri, who is currently in the news with his new book, The Ahoms, a Reimagined History. Mr. Arup Dutta, welcome to Talk Time.
Thank you.
Your new book, The Ahoms, a Reimagined History, you have of course written almost more than 5 to 6 dozen books, starting with the Kaziranga Trail that became famous, and now you are once again hitting the headlines with your new book, The Ahoms, a Reimagined History. Why do you call it reimagined?
Basically, although it is an accurate reproduction of medieval Assam's history, 600 years of the rule of the Ahom dynasty, much of the content of the book is based upon imaginative description. You see, the Ahom Burunjis depict events in a very concise kind of a way. For example, the incident of Sudangfa, who is also known as the Bamuni War, the Tungkhungia Burunji has only described it within 2 paragraphs, the entire reign of Sudangfa. What I have done is, I have enlarged it imaginatively into a whole chapter, introducing fictitious characters as well as a fictitious background. For example, there is a village called Kolabari. There are characters called 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗺 and 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗺 and Baduli, etc., etc. There is an exciting story about a spy coming to the village to find out the whereabouts of the younger queen. So all these things, throughout the book, there is an imaginative depiction of historical events without sacrificing
the facts,
historical accuracy.
Absolutely. You are, of course, known for that. You are both a fiction and a non-fiction writer. And at times, many a times, you decided to combine or fuse the both. And that is the reason why your narratives become so telling. And one has to, read it without any excursion outside the book. That is, of course, has been your hallmark. Now you see, 600 years, a dynasty that has ruled Assam for 600 years, and yet forget about the rest of the world, the rest of India, I can safely perhaps say, is not fully aware of the Ahom dynasty. Now, was it in the back of your mind when you were writing this book, The Ahoms?
You have absolutely hit the nail on the head, saying that the rest of India doesn't know much about Assam's history, whether it be the Ahom dynasty, whether it be the contribution of the Northeast towards independence movement.
Absolutely, yes.
So, as perhaps you know, my mission throughout my life has been to project Assam history, Assam other things into a outside audience. So this Ahoms is a part of my same mission to familiarize some people outside the Northeast about a dynasty which has made such a tangible impact, not only the history of this region, but perhaps the history of Southeast Asia.
Absolutely. Until Sukapha, the first Ahom ruler, came in and established his base in eastern Assam in 1228, after traversing a very difficult terrain. He was roaming around in the Patkai ranges for quite some time. Then he descended in what is the present, we call in and around the Sibsagar area in eastern Assam. Now, the point is, do you think, at that time, if you look back into the history around that time, everything was absolutely, there was no cohesive entity. There was nothing called Assam at that point of time. Everybody was fighting each other, the small tribes. There was clannish rivalries. There were tribes which were trying to, fight for territory. There was a turf war going on. and 𝗧𝗵𝗲 stabilized the situation. And do you think, would you regard the Ahoms, so for that matter, the first king and the dynasty as a whole, in trying to give shape to the Assamese society, the growth of the Assamese civilization, if I may use the word?
Again, I think you're quite familiar, and I'm happy to note that you know your background of Assamese cultural and social development. Now, what happened was, throughout the millennia, there was a steady migration from other parts of the Asia as well as mainland India to this region. Now, about a millennia ago, there was a Mongoloid influx from western China, mainly from the Yunnan province. And that influx was sporadic. It didn't come at one time. It came in sporadic waves to colonize this region. So what resulted was the formation of small societies in the hills and the plains of the northeast. Now, what the Ahoms did was to act as a coagulating force between the various ethnic small communities to form what is known as the Greater Assamese race. They did it firstly through conquest, secondly through assimilation through intermarriages.
Right.
But obviously the language factor was very important. They helped develop a common Assamese language. They gave up their own religion, they gave up their own language to adopt the prevailing rate. In multifarious ways, you can say the Ahoms were the one major catalyst which went to the formation of the Assamese people. Of course, you cannot underplay the role of individuals like Mahapurush Shankardeva.
Absolutely, because that was a entirely different thing altogether, because he was the great philosopher saint, that Neo Vaishnavite movement, 16th century.
Yes.
He dominated the scene. Again, our great guru, Srimanta Shankardeva, perhaps like the Ahoms, or for that matter, the contribution, as you said very rightly, the freedom fighters in the freedom road. Our great guru is also needs to be popularized, perhaps to a far greater degree, because the Hottier dance took such a long time to be recognized as an Indian classical dance form.
Again, absolutely true, because many people have come across outside this thing. When you mention the word Shankardeva, they confuse with Shankaracharya. They think it's the same figure.
Who is responsible for this? Do you think to a great extent? Now look at 𝗧𝗵𝗵. The government of Assam recently had a big event. You and I both were there in New Delhi. In fact, I edited that volume called 𝗧𝗵𝗵,
yes.
Assam's hero who
halted. I've seen it. It's beautifully produced.
Thank you. Even 𝗧𝗵𝗵, he was a contemporary of Shivaji Maharaj. If Shivaji Maharaj was battling the Mughals in Western India, Lassit was battling the Mughals in Eastern India, but people know Shivaji, but not Lassit. But for that, who is responsible? Do you think the historians or the writers have confined people like the Ahoms or Lassit, or for that matter, into the confines between Sadia to Dhubri, that is the boundary of Assam?
Yes, I think both elements are responsible. Firstly is that the pan-Indian perspective somehow ignores regions in the periphery. So it is one of the adverse consequences of remoteness which the Northeast is facing as far as knowledge of this area outside is concerned. That kind of ignorance is slightly being lessened nowadays because of the advances of communication technology.
And writers like you from a long time have adopted a pan-India outlook.
Yes.
Because perhaps, I'm not generalizing at all, I have no business to generalize. Some of the writers in the past had they didn't have a pan-India focus or a pan-India outlook, which writers like you and the present generation of new writers have. Now HarperCollins It's a multinational publishing house. They've acquired the world rights for this particular book. Can I have a look at the book and
Please.
show it to the viewers? Yeah. So this basically is the book, the Ahoms, that Mr. Arup Kumar Dutta has written. And this is the book published by HarperCollins, and it's a multinational publishing house who've acquired the world rights for this book. Now, do you think this is going to, bring Assam history, not just the history of the Ahoms? Do you think Assam is going to be better known outside, because this book is now available in major online platforms like Amazon?
Yes. I think this Ahoms, this is a drop in the ocean. We need more effort. You had mentioned this Government of India's, this publicizing the character of 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗺𝗃
Government of India and Government of Assam.
Government of Assam to the outside world. I think this was the first occasion when one of our iconic historical figures had been projected in such a way outside.
Such a scale.
Yes, and what have our politicians been doing for so long? What have our intellectuals, our historians, what have they been doing? So the fault is not only that North Indian, rest of India has ignored the periphery, but we ourselves have not been able to project this region in the way it should have been projected.
Now you have written the book, I'm talking about the present book, the Ahoms, a reimagined history. People will buy the book, people will read. But as a writer, would you like the governments, the state governments in the country, or for that matter, do you want the Assam government to take an initiative to have a chapter on the Ahom dynasty in the All India school and college curricula?
Not only the Ahom dynasty, but also various facets of the Northeast. Our ethnological profile, our culture. I have written a book called the 𝗵𝗵𝗺𝗃.
Yeah.
Now that book has proved to be a bestseller with National Book Trust, because the book contains not only a profile of the river, but also the culture and the civilization that grew up around it. And its success, publication success, has been mainly due to the fact that there are people outside who want to know more about the Northeast.
Absolutely.
But they have not been provided with the right kind of material. So I think it is a time that we make a very, what you call, strong pitch for familiarizing the Northeast to the
rest of the country, and then of course outside.
And as you said, nowadays it is we have these various platforms.
Right.
So I think it has become far easier, not only through the printed book form, but using other media.
To take your book across anywhere, actually.
Anywhere.
Absolutely.
Not only my book, but also other facets of the Northeast.
Absolutely. On that note, we go for a short break. Don't go away. I am in an engaging conversation with writer Arup Kumar Dutta. Welcome back. I am in conversation with Mr. Arup Kumar Dutta, who just authored the book, The Ahoms, a Reimagined History, and is in the news. What have been your challenges when you were writing a book, a historical book like the Ahoms? Of course, you had the Ahom Buronjis to fall back upon, but there are not very many books in the English language. Of course, you had a lot of material in Assamese language, apart from the Buronjis. What were some of your challenges? How long did you take to write this book? What was your objective, basically?
I depended more on secondary sources rather than primary sources. In other books, quite a few other books, for example, The Final Frontier, I had to take recourse to primary sources for this. I had to hunt out. But there's enough material on the Ahoms that secondary reading of the sources and, basing your book upon them is possible nowadays. And of course, not only the Ahom Buranjis, but also I took recourse to other things because, as I told you, this book is almost 80% imaginary retelling.
Right.
So, in order to communicate that kind of a backdrop, I had to take recourse to books which did not actually deal with Ahom history, but with that period in general. I'll just give you one example. Now, we nowadays have matchbox, which you can light in order to make a fire.
Yeah.
But at that time, how did a household light a fire? Now, for that kind of information, I had to go to other sources in order to get this thing. For example, there's a book, very little known book, called 𝗧𝗵𝗵 𝗧𝗵𝗵 by a historian from Jorhat, 𝗪𝗁𝗺 𝗧𝗵𝗃. Now there, you get detailed description of how a maidam or a burial crypt is made. What were the people, how the people lit fires, kept them alive in their house. So, lots of interesting depictions about that period. So I had taken recourse to that kind of material also.
Right. I had written a biography recently, and there was some reference that the Ahom king used to stay, of course, in Sibsagar, and then he used to take the prasads every day from that a temple in 𝗪𝗏 every morning, and there were no vehicles. And the king would not start his day without taking the prasad from that Shiva temple in 𝗪𝗏. And during discussions with people who were familiar with that story, they said that they used to keep horsemen at various places. So each horseman would pass the prasad immediately to the next, and in no time the king would get the prasad from the temple in 𝗪𝗏. By now if you go by car, it will take about perhaps 1.5 hours to reach from 𝗪𝗏 to Sibsagar. But so these were some, as you said, that how people used to light a fire at that time. Now, what was the objective? What do you think the young generation should be fascinated towards history? And if they have to be fascinated towards history, just the dumping them with facts won't do, and historians of these today have to take recourse to something like what you have done in a storytelling manner, fictionalized a little bit without distorting facts. Do you think that is one of the approach that can be taken?
Yes, because the kind of feedback I have received, that element of imaginative retelling, I think that has attracted readers more than anything else.
Absolutely, because I have found a very interesting, somebody has written the narrative about your book. This is a feedback. I have got it on the net. The narrative style is what stayed with me. In a very cozy bonfire storytelling fashion, Dutta has relayed the story of several generations of kings and kingmakers for the reader to lap up. I enjoyed reading it. He said, in a very cozy bonfire storytelling fashion. Very apt description. That you have lit a bonfire and you are listening to a story.
I have used an artifice because it's a 600 years history,
right?
And you cannot cram anything,
about 400 pages.
Within 400 pages. So I have created some kind of an artifice of the narrator who is telling the village people about the history of the race around, just as you said, a bonfire. So he is telling the history of the race not in an academic fashion, but in the same cozy, intimate kind of way.
Absolutely.
So that was my main intention, having the narrator as one of the characters. Also, in order to telescope events and what you call periods of 600 years into that 400 pages.
Absolutely. Now, how did HarperCollins come to pick up the book and acquire the world rights?
Well, obviously, you have to, approach them first. And I did approach this thing with the same procedure, having a synopsis, also sample pages, etc. And they found not only the theme, but stylistic content also were quite interesting. And they picked it up in no time.
Right. Finally, all good conversations will have to come to an end, particularly in television where there is always lack of time. What would you like to tell your readers or would-be readers about the book? And with that, we'd like to conclude this conversation.
Well, to the outside reader, I would like to tell them that just go through the book and get some kind of acquaint yourself with some kind of idea about the history of this fascinating region, a slice of the history of this fascinating region. To our people, especially the younger generation, I'd like to tell them that history, those who do not read history, are fated to repeat the same mistakes. And this kind of a book is very much essential to our modern context, because what we are seeing today is that Assamese society is reversing the process which the Ahoms had initiated. They had brought the various components of amorphous Assamese society together. They acted as a coagulating force.
Right.
But today our society is disintegrating, and we have to look to the Ahom, the genesis of the Ahom dynasty, in order to, try to stem the kind of degeneration and disintegration that is taking place.
So such kind of books and recalling the past is very necessary for our sustenance itself.
Yes, obviously, history is very important to chart out a roadmap for the future.
Absolutely, Mr. Arup Kumar Dutta, that was indeed fascinating. Thank you so much for bringing out this book, the third longest running dynasty in India, and you have written this book. Thank you so much for being with me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.